Coffee starts as a seed. Hope also starts as a seed. This is a story about something that might go either way. Maybe it comes to nothing, but maybe it changes the world for people in the remote West African upcountry, a place that could really use some hope. I'm Michelle Fish. My husband, Bob, is the co-CEO of one of the largest coffee shop chains in the United States. And together, we are the founders of One Big Island in Space. We're on a mission to change the way coffee is bought and sold around the world. We've been traveling the globe looking for millions of pounds of coffee from producers that are doing the right thing for their people, for the planet, and for their communities. When we find them, we connect them to a marketplace of buyers that will pay them the right price for their coffee, now and for years to come. It's a model that is beyond fair trade and beyond USDA organic. We call it Farm Direct. Our visits don't always work out, but we won't stop going until we can put a name, a face, and a place on every cup of coffee we serve. It's a long way to Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. Bob and I flew from Chicago to Paris, where we met up with Jorge Ferre Machado, our Farm Direct partner from Nicaragua. From Paris, it's another 8 hours to Lungi International Airport, then a half-hour boat ride across the bay to the capital city. The closer we got, the stronger the smell of burning trash, burning plastic. It's an acrid smell that followed us everywhere in the city. We were met at the dock by Kadi with hugs, smiles, and a big basket of oranges, and we trundled off in her car to make the climb to her city house. She fed us a wonderful meal of rice and spicy stewed vegetables, and then, finally, we collapsed into our rooms. Kadiatu Ali is from the upcountry. She got a great education in Sierra Leone. After earning her bachelor's degree, she got scholarships to continue her education in the U.S., eventually landing a key job for a multinational corporation. She married her husband, Emmanuel, and although they've made their life together in the United States, their hearts are with their people in Sierra Leone. In fact, her husband moved back there recently to work with an NGO. Kadi's grandfather had been a coffee farmer, so the story of coffee was something she'd grown up with. Now she has an uncle and many first cousins and second cousins and third cousins that are all still trying to make a living in coffee. Freetown was built to be a haven for enslaved peoples set free by the British in the early 1800s. The city was built to house 300,000 people. It is currently home to roughly 3 million. It was once surrounded by lush forests and multiple rivers, but with the pressure of rapid population growth, first the forest disappeared, then the rivers dried up, and everywhere you look there are makeshift houses in improbable places on the hillside. If J. Alfred Prufrock measured out his life in coffee spoons, then ours can be understood as a series of bumpy, snug rides in SUVs. The further you get from Freetown, the bumpier and rockier the road gets.
This is how we know we're in coffee country.
We bounce, we jiggle, and we smash into each other for hours at a time. It's not comfortable, but it does sure build a lot of team bonding in a big hurry. Everywhere, you see evidence of agriculture. People drying rice in their front yards, lots of coffee drying on the ground in the sun, or palm nuts or cocoa, and poverty. Everywhere we have ever been, even in the poorest of communities, we find people on the ground that are trying to help. Whether it's church organizations, NGOs, private industry, or the government. In the villages we visited, there was none of that. These people are on their own.
All the children in this particular village were malnourished, and it was visible. He says it's obvious that they're only sustaining themselves on rice. There's no protein.
Which brings me, at long last, to the coffee. When we would arrive in a village, Kadi would introduce us to the chief. Then we would go to the fields. But visitors to these parts are extremely rare. We were the circus, and we'd just come to town. When you walk into the forest, you see coffee plants that haven't been pruned in years, maybe never. Some are 12 to 14 feet high, and they are sickly looking with sparse branches. The forest canopy, which should provide between 30 to 40% shade, completely covers the sky. That, in turn, has created the ideal environment for pests and diseases. The plants are covered in spiders and ants. In fact, they have to pick in the morning because the fire ants get very aggressive in the afternoon. None of the farmers knew what variety of coffee they were growing, and they don't know anything about fertilizing or composting. All they know about farming is that you have to brush the fields. Basically, that means clearing weeds from around the plants. And you have to pick the cherries. But they don't know how, what, or when to pick. So they pick everything. The red ones, the green ones, the fruit that has become rotten on the branch, everything. And they don't so much pick as they strip the beans off the branches in one long swoop. That usually breaks the branch. But even if it doesn't, it strips away the next year's bud, which is next season's crop.
Did you have any training? No.
So he's only doing it based on his own knowledge.
Yeah.
He has.
Yeah.
Coffee starts fermenting the second it is picked, which is why it's so important to get the cherries to the drying beds as soon as possible. But no one taught the farmers how to process. And so they might leave their coffee in a sack on the field for a day or overnight as it starts to rot, completely ruining whatever character was left in the bean.
You could call a little bit of earthy or moldy.
Yeah. And not much of the coffee smell
Yeah.
itself.
They spread their coffee out, usually straight on the ground, where even more insects can get at it. We saw chickens, dogs, and other livestock walking through the dried coffee. They might be drying their coffee next to their cooking fire, or where they burn their trash. The thing to know about coffee is that it's hygroscopic, which means it absorbs everything in the air around it. We visited many, many villages, one after the other, in our 3 days up country. Every single farm we walked had the exact same problems. Once upon a time, there had been coffee and coffee farmers. People who actually understood and practiced the proper agronomy. But Sierra Leone endured a brutal civil war in the late 90s and early 2000s, and then an Ebola outbreak in 2014. And all of the institutional knowledge about coffee is gone. Every single farmer we talked to asked us, in fact begged us, for one thing: access to knowledge. And there's a lot of information that Jorge shared. But implementing his suggestions is impractical when you consider how much duress these producers are under. They can't possibly work all of the hectares they have by themselves, let alone adding new steps and more processes. And every year, they get paid less.
But he has to sell below market, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and what is the right price?
30 to 35,000 per kilo.
That's still not enough.
No.
No.
They are working as hard as they can, but it's as if they're trapped in a downward spiral, not able to realize any real benefit from their labor. It's heartbreaking and so demoralizing. And sadly, Jorge was the one who had to deliver the bad news. He was the one that looked into those faces so full of hope that we would buy their coffee and tell them that their production methods weren't working. We'd come to Sierra Leone with the hope that we'd find an incredible new farm direct opportunity. But given the state of the coffee, it was a non-starter. We were walking through a village, and out of nowhere, a woman comes up and starts tugging on my sleeve. And I look down, and I see a toddler on her hip, and I see her right breast is exposed. And on it is just a giant cyst, about the size of a tennis ball. And you can just see the heat coming off of it. And I look into her eyes, and I have never seen a woman so desperate. She had mastitis. It's a blocked milk duct. Any of us that have ever had children, had breastfed children, know what that is, and we know it hurts. I didn't know what to do. But fortunately, I didn't have to know what to do. because in our merry band, we happen to have a doctor with us, a practicing physician who is also an amazing coffee farmer, Jorge. Jorge came over and was able to give her an examination. And he was able to prescribe her an antibiotic. Kadi had relatives with her that could drive the 3 hours that it would take to get to the nearest town to get that prescription filled. And Kadi was able to pay for that medicine. Jorge told me that she was 24 to 48 hours away from succumbing to septic shock and dying. That woman didn't have any access to any of those things, but for this like lightning bolt encounter. And I have to tell you, I've been thinking about her ever since that happened. I talked about hope being a seed. So where's the hope here when everything looks so bleak? One answer, Kadi. When she contacted us, she knew next to nothing about coffee. In fact, she rarely drinks it at home. But she walked field after field with Jorge and listened very carefully as he explained the steps that are necessary to bring the coffee back to life. By the 4th or 5th farm, Kadi was telling the assembled farmers what they need to do.
And get rid of the shade, the bushes will grow very fast.
By day 3, she was hatching a plan.
Right. So I thought about it. Should I be the one organizing them and just like helping them organize? And I can get people to help me,
She began to get the idea that if she could start a model farm using the proper practices, it could become a laboratory to train some of these producers and increase their quality. And if they start producing quality coffee at high enough volumes, Obis will be there to buy it on behalf of Bigby Coffee at a fair, sustainable price.
With that kind of money, people will stay. If you provide them something concrete like this, some employment, a lot of them will stay.
Our Obis team is committed to supporting Kadi on this journey with whatever knowledge and technical expertise we can provide. It's a long shot, but what if it works? Kadi could change the economic fortunes for the people in countless villages in the upcountry, and she will help develop a brand new, lucrative hard currency export crop. The challenge ahead of Kadi may be daunting, but my bet will always be on her. We can't wait to see what happens next.